Hello and welcome, everybody, to the first ever edition of GC Live Foul Balls. I am joined with my lovely co-host, the lefty specialist, Collyn Taylor. Collyn, how we doing, boss?
I am fantastic. A little tired with everything going on, but a lot of fun. This baseball team has been a lot of fun to cover through these first, 17 games, if I'm doing my math right. And really excited to kind of talk about it and get everybody up to speed on every fun thing that's been happening. And baseball's kind of my nerd. I get to nerd out over baseball because I'm a huge numbers guy. So very excited to see and talk a few numbers. I have like all these insane spreadsheets that I have.
Oh, yeah. I've seen them. They're legit.
They're insane. But I'm excited to talk South Carolina baseball every Monday night at 7 p.m. where we'll recap the series that was and kind of look ahead to the recap what it means for South Carolina, and kind of today's the big one. So kind of recapping the first 4 weeks of the season and previewing what's going to be, or what should be, a really fun trek through these next 10 or so weeks of SEC play. So before we get started, I would like to talk to y'all about Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network, ClintHammond.com. You obviously see him right there. He is the title sponsor of everything you see and hear at Gamecock Central on our YouTube channel. Branch manager there, fantastic human. Clint loves South Carolina, and we ask you to help the people that help us, and Clint has helped us a ton. So if you're looking to sell your home, buy a home, Clint's the guy you need to be looking out for. You got all of his information right there. See him in the Mortgage Network. Absolutely, his NMLS number. One day I'm going to get that thing right without having to slow it down. You see it right there. Everything you need, Clint can help you out. He is your guy. He is a Columbia dude, a South Carolina guy. And like I said, support the people that support us, and go if you need to sell your home or if you need to buy one. Clint is your guy to do that. So reach out to him if you have any questions or anything like that you want from Clint, and he'll hook you up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then, if you guys need his number is above us.
Yeah, as you can see, it's
yep.
Yeah, it's up there the entire time. It's what being a presenting sponsor will do for you.
Absolutely. So, Collyn, I guess kicking it off, we'll start with the offense.
Yeah, that's what everyone wants to talk about, right? The pitching staff's the pitching staff, but this offense has been pretty doggone good. Lived up to at least some of the billing through the first 17 games. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And hashtag Gamecock Home Run Tracker. We'll give my plug there for my running tweet. And we are going to pull up some of those home runs. We'll make that a little segment once we get further into this, kind of work out the kinks a little bit. But yeah, Collyn, the offense has really, really, really been clicking. To me, it's the Monty Lee effect, arguably, because last year you struggled with hitting, so then you bring in an assistant coach who is well versed in the subject, and I've just kind of heard from inside the building that Monty's really, really been helping when it comes to the cages and everything, and just their whole stance on hitting. So I think the addition of Monty Lee has helped a lot, and then we're seeing it. Offense this early in the year, we didn't really see that last year. We didn't see this much firepower early on in the year. And so that's, my initial take is the Monty effect, and it's been runs after runs after runs, and their bats have gotten them out of a lot of sticky situations early on in the games. And we saw the Clemson series too, with the game in Greenville, especially, where it was back and forth and the bats just stayed hot and were able to respond, which I don't think we've seen in a while, not let alone last year. So I'm really happy to see what the bats have done and are doing so far heading into SEC play.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I said it on our 107.5 show today, but I don't think Chad Kaye gets enough credit for the job he did last year. Now, the stats don't bear it out because South Carolina ranked at or near the bottom in most offensive categories. But for Kaye to do that, it's with 4 proven hitters and a bunch of freshmen. I think he got the most out of that offense, which is saying a lot. And the cupboard was a lot deeper and better stocked for Monty Lee to come in because Kaye brought in all the transfers that you've seen. Gavin Costas's, the Caleb Denny's, the Will McGillis's, the Dylan Brewers, the Jonathan French's, all of which are making an impact early. And their approaches, their philosophies are the same. Line drives, get on base, and set the stage for the dudes that can hit the ball 400 feet.
Yeah.
But it's a difference in how you go about doing it. Kaye was very big on, they both want to use the whole field. What hitting coach doesn't want to use the whole field?
Yeah.
But Kaye was very much a attack early in counts. The pitcher's probably going to throw his best pitch early in your at bat just to get ahead, or if he falls behind, he's going to try to use that pitch to get ahead or get a strike call. Whereas Monty Lee, it's very much hey, let's grind out at bats. Let's work 5, 6, 7 pitch at bats, foul some stuff off, be gritty, grind, and do that with power to boot, and then there's something that you can work with there. So, and he's even said it in immediate availability. He's like, if we take a strike that's borderline, we take a strike that's borderline. We're going to walk a ton, and we might strike out a ton just because we're taking a bunch of pitches, and sometimes that happens. So it's one of those where the offense has clicked. The offense has done what it's supposed to. Is it going to stick? Who knows? We've seen this team have really good offensive starts, and they get to the SEC where pitching staffs are incredibly deep, and it scuffles at times. So I think South Carolina, this is probably the most optimistic I've been in the SEC for a while. And in reality, if you're South Carolina, you'd like to have a top 3 or 4 offense in the league. Don't get me wrong. But with this pitching staff, you don't feel the pressure to have to go out there and put up, 10 runs a game, 8 runs a game, because that pitching staff is going to keep most opponents down. And that's what you want to see for South Carolina, that complement of a pitching staff that can keep you in games and an offense that, if you're trailing late, can really surge forward. And that's what you want if you're South Carolina. And I've been really impressed with what they're doing from that standpoint and grinding out at bats. And then you pair that with a ton of talent and a ton of experience on this roster, and you got a good thing right now as you get into SEC play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess looking at the bad side of things, some games in that non-conference schedule, you started a little slow, and then the bats kind of picked up. And I'm looking at Clemson in particular. That Friday game, bats were just kind of asleep. But I don't know, like, complaints for the bad side of things, the swing of it. I mean, limit the strikeouts going into SEC play. But I think, to your point about what Monty said about taking pitches, I think that's kind of what has been happening when guys are striking out or walking in times where, you would expect them, or guys on base, or just kind of a clutch situation where you would expect a guy to, at least put it in play or keep going. I think that kind of strategy gets them in trouble, or it has gotten them in trouble from a little bit from what I've watched in the non-conference schedule. So, I mean, in terms of the bad, if I had to pick on one thing, it would be that, just kind of taking those questionable pitches. It's gotten them in some trouble before. So that would kind of be the bad, Collyn. I don't know if you want to touch on that real quick.
Yeah, and it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're exactly. You saw it a little bit with if it's a staff that likes to throw strikes, and they throw strikes that are getting called, or they're getting favorable calls, then all of a sudden you're looking at an 0-2 count or a 1-2 count, and then you're kind of in the hole, and you're not able to. You're in defense mode. You're in defend mode more so than anything. And they've been good with 2 strikes, but you'd rather be hitting 2-1 or 0-1 instead of down 2 strikes. So there's a double-edged sword there, that if you're taking pitches, sometimes you're going to get in disadvantageous counts, and if that happens, then you're in defense mode for a lot of the game. So we saw that at times against Penn. We saw that at times, especially against Clemson in that Friday game, and then that I guess whatever that was, the early in the Saturday game. So yeah, that's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I mean, from the most part, these guys are getting in advantageous counts and making the most of it. So if you're South Carolina, you have to be pleased with that. One thing that I'm, concerned about is the lack of a leadoff hitter, a true leadoff hitter. Mm-hmm. You've tried, I I want to say 4 different guys now there. And Caleb Denny, Mark Kingston said after the Saturday or Friday game against Bethune-Cookman, that's probably the answer, at least right now going forward.
Yep.
But he's been scuffling of late. He's a dude that is, I think, 4 for his last 30 or 4 for his last 32 or something like that. So with 12 strikeouts to go along with it. So you need to get him hitting. And if he does, he is a high on base guy. He is a dude that can hit for some power at the top of the lineup. But if you're South Carolina, you would really like to find a leadoff hitter as you get into the thick of SEC play.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue, actually, into our next portion of the offensive side. Collyn, I'll pose this to you. What does the ideal lineup look like?
I think it's what you've seen
I agree.
over the course of the last 3 games with Dylan Brewer in center field, Caleb Denny in left with Petrie in right. Then you got Messina behind the plate, Lee Croy at third, Wimmer at short, McGillis at second, Casas at first, and then Horning as your DH. I think that's what probably, from an offensive standpoint, that's probably your best offensive lineup by far as it sits right now. And it allows you some flexibility. You saw it on Saturday in the doubleheader. You're facing a lefty. You move Messina to the DH. Jonathan French can come in to catch. Horning is on the bench. If you're facing a lefty like that, so you're more right-handed, but if you're facing a righty, then Horning can easily slide back into that DH spot and Messina goes to catch. So there's some flexibility in that, but I think the lineup you saw on Friday night and then the first game Saturday is probably right now what your best lineup looks like offensively speaking. And defensively, it's probably different. You probably have Evan Stone in there somewhere because he's that good of a defender.
Unreal.
You probably have Petrie as the DH, even though he's getting better in right. But there's some flexibility there, I think. And if you're South Carolina, I think that's a really good thing for you as you go into SEC plays. You have 9 or 10 guys that you feel pretty good about trotting out there and playing on a given day.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with the first game on Saturday lineup. That's kind of where I was going. With Denny in left, you have Horning DHing, and then you have Brewer in center. I mean, Stone's our guy. And you said defensively.
That's 4 kid. That's 4 kid, baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And good friend of mine, Evan Stone, unbelievable human being. Shout out him. But, I mean, he's just been slumping at the plate recently, and Brewer's been bringing the pop. Brewer didn't look great in the Penn series, but turned it on certainly against UNC Upstate with the longest homer of the year, going, I think it was 463, I believe, to deep center field. That was
a lot.
Yeah,
it was a lot.
It was a bomb, man. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Denny in left, Wimmer at short, Casas hitting third at first. I like Horning at DH. I'm going to get into. I'll touch a little bit more about him as we'll name off our MVPs here coming up.
Yeah.
But Horning, I like him at the DH. I also kind of liked Casas at DH when he does need a break. You got to keep his bat in the lineup. I mean, he's been unbelievable.
And he's been really good at first base too. He's been a lot better than I initially thought he was going to be at first base to start the year, at least. So that's really good. Yeah, it's really positive for him.
Yeah, he's definitely progressed a lot. Like, I mean, in the first couple games, we were kind of, he was shaking off the rust, if you will, and that's why they kind of bumped him in and out of that DH spot. But, I mean, as of late, he's been nails at first base. That's, I mean, ideally, that's your lineup, the first or the one for the first game against Bethune-Cookman. So that's my take. Collyn, you want to get into some non-conference offensive MVPs?
Let's do it. I'll let you go first as the young buck in the room.
All righty. I love it. All right. So my offensive MVP would be Mr. Cole Messina, the Moose. Moose this year so far has 23 hits, 23 runs, 7 home runs, and 27 RBIs. He's been on an absolute tear. Arguably one of the best nicknames on the team. And he's been the most consistent hitter next to Gavin Casas. And so, I mean, that's kind of my logic behind the pick. And again, Messina hits nukes. But again, it was really, really close between Messina and Casas. I went a little different route. Obviously, I could have went with Casas for the newcomer MVP, but I went with Caleb Denny. In terms of a newcomer, I think Denny kind of embodies it. He's kind of fresh, not only to this program, but to college baseball. And so I think Denny is one of those guys where, you need his bat in the lineup. And obviously Casas is, he is another newcomer coming out of Vanderbilt, but it feels like he's been here forever.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I went with Denny. Denny, 19 hits, 18 runs, 3 home runs, and 24 RBIs. He's also been on a tear. My breakout star would be Mr. Willis, as I like to call him on Twitter. 13 hits, 13 RBIs, 7 home runs. And I think, what doesn't get talked about enough with Willis is his defensive ability. He's made a lot of good plays at second base, and it's not very often where you have a second baseman that can rake like he does. So I think McGillis is your breakout star. He's really kind of come into his own. Another guy that transferred in from Southern Miss, and he was raking at Southern Miss. So it's not really a big surprise to anyone who saw his stats at Southern Miss. But, he's been on a tear, and I think another reason why he's my breakout star is just because of his ability to do it on, offense and defense, because his second base was kind of a questionable position with Wimmer moving over. You didn't really know what you were going to get. And Will McGillis has stepped up in a big way. So lastly, my unsung hero is Carson Hornung. We talked about him being in DH. I said I'd bring him back up. Carson's got 13 runs, 12 hits, 2 home runs, and 13 RBIs. The kid has really come into his own recently, and his bat has certainly found some life. I think, he's going to continue to progress through SEC play. And I think, again, he's another guy, that was a catcher. This team had so many guys that can play catcher, and, there was a big competition for who was going to start at catcher and who was going to play DH. Lee Croy being another guy that, luckily Lee Croy can play third. But, Hornung's my unsung hero because, I feel like he doesn't get talked about enough. His bat just hasn't been talked about enough. And especially with him really coming into his own a little bit, later in this non-conference schedule, he's going to be my guy to watch going into, SEC play. If he can keep the momentum rolling and keep hitting the ball, I think, he's going to be really, really deadly. So I think those are my MVPs. Interested to hear yours.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'll start and I'll say my offensive MVP, I'll go Gavin Casas early.
Yeah.
Dude in the middle of the order, a guy that can only because I'm going to switch it up for the newcomer. Middle of the order, I can watch Gavin swing all day just from how gorgeous. I love a left-handed bat. Just he's able to just really clear things. It's a pretty swing. And I still think there's more in the tank for him. What's really impressed me with him is his ability to take walks. Those strikeout numbers will probably continue to increase or maybe tick up as you get into league play, but you'd like to see him hit for a little bit more contact. But a dude that can hit the ball 400 feet, you don't care if he's not, if he's hitting singles or whatever. So really impressed with him. I think he's your MVP early. My newcomer will be Ethan Petrie, a dude that, for the most part, I didn't expect him. I don't think Ethan even expected himself to be where he is right now. But he makes some adjustments in the preseason, gets 2 opportunities through the first 2 games, hits hard, 106 mile an hour off the bat singles, gets a start and hasn't left the starting lineup since. Has been really impressive. Still needs to continue to get more comfortable and right. But you need his bat in the lineup right now. And a guy that's hitting really well, does a lot of things well, grinds out at bats. He takes pitches, hits sac flies. He gives you, the old cliche of a team at bat. And if you're South Carolina, that's what you want. You just need that team at bat, something that can, if there's a runner at third and 1 out, he lifts the ball to right field for a sac fly and allows the guy to get home and score. So, that's a huge thing, and for South Carolina, that's what you want from a freshman. You don't want to have to put too much pressure on him to be the guy, and he can kind of come in there and play his role. So I think that's huge. My breakout star, I could put Cole Messina here. I thought about putting Cole Messina here, but since you said Cole, I'll go Tal LeCroy, a guy that, wasn't expecting, he started to really come along well in the fall. And you're like, okay, well, like if he continues to do this in the preseason, he's got a shot. And then all of a sudden, he continues it, and you're like, well, he's got to have his bat in the lineup somewhere. And it has been great so far. Another team at bat guy. And if you're South Carolina, your issue last year was, hey, listen, we just don't have anything past our top 4 or 5 guys in the order just because everyone's so young. And LeCroy was one of those guys. But now he's giving you length. Him, Hornung, Petrie, McGillis, Brewer now, they're giving you length in that lineup to where it's tough to pitch to them 1 through 9. If you're South Carolina, you get through the fit 5 hole, and it was kind of easier to get through that more often than not. So I'll go him just because he's a guy that's just been so doggone consistent most of the year. And unsung hero is a little interesting to me. So I haven't really thought about it a ton, but I'm going to go Braylon Wimmer. Because he's been so good. We don't talk enough about Braylon Wimmer.
Okay.
And for a dude that is just hitting right now, like a dude that's just gone out there and just hit. He's done exactly what he's supposed to. He's played a clean shortstop. He's a guy that's just doing what he's supposed to do. And, if you're Braylon Wimmer, you came back to be that guy, to be the all-SEC kind of player you hoped you could be. And he's done that so far. Next step's doing it in league play, but a dude that is really going to help you in SEC play, a dude that he just hits. That's all, and he's going to be consistent as possible in that number 2 hole all year. And if you get that from him, I think you're going to have a good year if you're South Carolina offensively. And been really, 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 really impressed with him as you go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason why I didn't talk about Wimmer is because I guess there is.
You forget about him.
We do. And there are, it's kind of the expectation that, okay, this is the guy, almost the
He's just
captain.
going to hit.
Yeah. He's got a captain feel to it where everyone just kind of expects him to do well. And it's just, and he is so far so good. And it's just the expectation that, he's doing well, and it is what it is. And I like him for unsung hero because not a lot of people do actually talk about him. It's just kind of assumed that, okay, yeah, Wimmer's doing well.
He just hits.
Going to do well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So is our guest in the waiting room now?
Yes.
There
absolutely. So we can go to our guest as we're joined by our good friend Palmer Thombs. I'm sorry if I butchered that. But from UGA on 3 site, Dogs Online, I believe, correct?
Dogs HQ.
Dogs HQ. My bad. But yeah,
it's Gators. It's Gators Online. Don't mix this up with the Florida.
Yeah,
site.
Trust me. Yeah, I'm sure that.
That's my bad, boss. But, preview Georgia a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Palmer, I can't thank you enough for joining us. We got to meet, I guess, face-to-face in Nashville this past weekend, getting to watch some thrilling college basketball.
Yeah, I think both of us were one and done in Nashville at that tournament. And, we were already talking about this series and the excitement for baseball season, excitement for spring football, obviously, but baseball season is an exciting time of year in this conference, always is. And especially, you look at these 2 teams, South Carolina coming in with 1 loss to the series this weekend, Georgia having played some good baseball up to this point, maybe not expected to be doing this well, but there's certainly a buzz around Athens for this baseball team that there definitely was not for the basketball team.
I was about to say, baseball seems like it's really taken off, especially over the success maybe of the last couple of years. You have the Emerson Hancock teams that, made regionals, hosted regionals. What does this team, in the time you've been able to kind of watch them, some strengths, some weaknesses, and what this team's kind of done through the first 4 weeks of the year?
Yeah. So, I guess just an overall assessment of where Georgia baseball is at, first of all, is there is definitely a sense of frustration because you mentioned those Emerson Hancock type teams. Cole Wilcox was on them. I mean, Emerson, was an ace pitcher for Georgia in 2018, 2019, 2020. 2018 team was a national seed, hosted a regional, didn't make it out, lost to Duke in the last game of that regional. 2019 team, national seed, hosted a regional, didn't make it out, lost to Florida State, and just got shellacked by the Seminoles on their way to Omaha. And then that 2020 team was great. Number 2 team in the country, headed into a series that was going to be 1 versus 2 between Georgia and Florida. And then obviously COVID shuts it down. There was a lot of excitement about that team. I think if even around these parts in Athens, you talk to people and they still say that 2020 team was going to Omaha, and nobody can tell them no. Nobody can tell them that it wasn't going to happen. But that has kind of kept Scott Strickland, head coach for Georgia, off of the hot seat to this point, because they had that team that had it ripped out from underneath them. And I think a lot of people around the country probably feel that way, but definitely the folks at Georgia, because of what had happened 2 years before, making the regional, not making it out. 2021, they don't make the tournament. They were one of the last 4 teams out, and Georgia felt like they probably deserved to get in, beat LSU in the SEC tournament. LSU ends up making it in over them. 2022, they make it. They don't host. They're a 2 seed in Chapel Hill and lose in 3 games to UNC. They lost to VCU in the opener and then UNC in the 3rd game of that regional. So again, I think there's a lot of pressure on this team to do something. They're exceeding expectations already. I think they were picked 3rd to last in the SEC overall, 3rd to last in the East, right behind South Carolina, ahead of Missouri and Kentucky. The thing that is the story of this team so far has been the bats. They hit the ball and they score runs. They have put up in 16 games played, they've scored 10 or more runs in 10 of them. 2 more that they scored 9 in, and one of those 9s that they lost, which leads me to my next point. They don't necessarily have an ace pitcher. They don't have an Emerson Hancock. They don't have a Cole Wilcox in their back pocket. They don't have a Jonathan Cannon, who was an ace pitcher for them these last couple of seasons. So without that kind of a guy, they need to be able to hit the ball. And so far, so good. I mean, they're 12-4, have won every series up to this point, but it's snuck up on them on the weekends. It's snuck up on them on Sundays where, the depth of the bullpen may not necessarily be there. It gets tested because the starters haven't made it deep into games. And because the depth of the bullpen gets tested, you end up seeing a game that they drop on Sunday where they could have swept the series. That was the case against Princeton. That was the case against Georgia Tech. That they ended up winning the Sunday game in the opening series against Jacksonville State after dropping opening day. But, they lost the last game of the series this past weekend against Charleston Southern too. That was a doubleheader on Saturday as opposed to a Sunday game. But nonetheless, they've dropped 3 of their 4 final games of series. And so I think as you look at this team, you see the bats, you see the runs. That is exciting to people to watch, but they got to get the pitching going. And that starts with Jaden Woods on Friday night. Liam Sullivan has been a great Saturday starter for them. But those 2 guys, they're both juniors. They both have started games in the SEC. They're both experienced, but they've got to show up and be reliable in order for Georgia to be competitive in the SEC, because you're not going to put up 10 runs plus you can't just count on that happening every weekend. Right.
How much is Connor Tate out of eligibility at this point? It feels like he's been at Georgia forever at this point, right?
This will be Connor Tate's last season.
Okay.
So he his twin brother Cole Tate
Right.
was out of eligibility after last season. Connor redshirted their first year on campus, so he had one more year of eligibility. And man, he's off to a red hot start, hitting .516 so far this season. Has 6 home runs, 22 RBI. Had a school record 3 home runs in their game this past weekend. The first game of the doubleheader on Saturday. Hit single solo shots in the first inning, the second inning, and the third inning. So certainly an exciting way to start off that game that they ended up winning 15-0. But Charlie Condon has also been very impressive. Has more RBIs, has more home runs, has a league high .517 batting average and a nation leading 32 RBI. He has been an unsung hero for Georgia so far this season.
Yeah. You mentioned obviously Woods and Sullivan. How good have they been? Obviously, they haven't gotten deep into games at times, but how good have they been? And who are some guys that we should expect maybe on that Sunday? Do they have a set Sunday starter, or is it kind of by committee at this point?
So they've kind of established a Sunday starter already, with that being Nolan Crisp. Used to come out of the bullpen, was a closer at Florida before he transferred to Georgia. He's been at Georgia for a couple seasons and in and out of a starter's role. He did not start the season in the starter's role, came out of the bullpen in their first Sunday game of the season and was impressive, earned the right to start on Sunday. And so he's been that Sunday guy for them. But I mean, it is absolutely Sundays all around this league, but definitely for Georgia, more of a by committee thing. He's not necessarily a true starter, a guy that has probably 4 or 5 good innings in him. And then you're relying on the bullpen to help you finish out the game and the series. As for Woods and Sullivan, both of them have been really, really impressive, especially these last 3 weeks. If you go look at that opening series that they played against Jacksonville State, they dropped the first game on Friday night, and Jaden Woods went, I think he didn't make it out of the third inning. He gave up 2 home runs, and it was a struggle. They ended up losing that game. Next day, you go to Liam Sullivan on Saturday. Don't think he made it out of the third inning. He gave up 2 home runs. So the message coming out of that weekend was one of motivation for those 2 guys from Scott Strickland. He wanted Sullivan and Woods, knows how important that Friday starter is and your Saturday starter as well, to experienced guys. So he challenged them, and they've responded to that challenge. Liam went out after that against Princeton through 7 no-hit innings against the Tigers before coming out on a pitch count. Struck out, I think it was 11 in that game. Jaden on that Friday night also struck out 11 against Princeton. They were both impressive against Georgia Tech, and this past weekend both were impressive once again. Both moved to 3-0 on the season, got no decisions in that first start before winning the last 3. And Liam was really good again. I mean, he's got a 0.44 ERA with 6 hits allowed, 5 runs allowed. This past weekend he went 5 no-hit innings, and Georgia had a staff no-hitter headed into the 7th, gave up a single with 1 out against Charleston Southern. Again, a 15-0 run rule win there as a part of a doubleheader. So they gave up a single, but that was the only hit that they allowed on that Saturday first game. So Liam has been great. Jaden has been great. Both of them have been responded well to the challenge that they got. But again, as I said before, certainly a different challenge level that's ahead of them in the SEC, and they know that. They've been around the block. They know that. This team knows that. This coaching staff knows that. It's all about how these guys respond to that challenge now.
And let you get out here in a little bit, but I guess who are some guys, you look at the stats, and you got Charlie Condon, Connor Tate, Mason LaPlante. I mean, all these good position guys. Then you have a few key bullpen arms as well. If I'm going through Kyle Greenler, is that how you say it? Yeah.
Greenler, yeah.
Who are some guys that aren't getting talked about enough that South Carolina fans need to know, whether it's a position guy or a bullpen arm, that they need to know going into this series?
Yeah, so I'll give you one on each. You mentioned Mason LaPlante, transfer from Yale there. Certainly has been impressive for Georgia, hitting 356. But I'll go a little bit further down, and that's Will David, who's a transfer as well. He transferred in from Samford, and he's been impressive. Has 10 RBI to his name, 2 home runs, had a really strong weekend this past series. He's in and out of the starting lineup, but certainly somebody that can get plugged in at any point. And Parks Harbor has been really impressive. Got off to a hot start the first few weekends. Has battled injury here as of late. I don't think he participated in the games this past weekend, or if he did, it was pretty limited. Okay, so he did participate, but he was banged up. But that's certainly somebody to watch. And I think with Georgia and this lineup in general is there's a lot of position versatility. I mean, Charlie Condon can play first base. He can play outfield. Connor Tate is an outfielder, but he can DH. And actually played first base some this weekend. Mason LaPlante can play in the middle there. Sebastian Murillo is a transfer from Long Beach State that can play both positions in the middle. Ben Anderson, what you're getting with him, and a center fielder. Corey Collins can do a little bit of all. He can play in the outfield. He can play catcher. He can play first base. He can DH. Will David, first, short, or first and short are the only positions that he can't play in the infield. But definitely a third baseman and a second baseman there. Parks Harbor plays first and third. Cole Wagner can play in the infield, play in the outfield, can DH. There's a lot of position versatility, which I think gives Georgia a really good mix of lineups. And Scott Strickland the ability to kind of set that lineup based on the pitching matchups and change the lineup in the game based on pitching matchups. So those would be guys. I mean, that's pretty much everyone that plays for them.
Yeah.
In certain terms of position players, but there's a lot of them, and so. Those have been guys that have been worth watching. Dalton Radon's another transfer. You mentioned Kyle Greenler. Greenler transferred from Elon. Radon's transferred from Wofford, who Georgia actually plays tomorrow in its midweek series. Another team that comes into Athens with just one loss. They're 14-1, I believe. But he's been a great bullpen pitcher for them. Chandler Marsh, Nolan Crisp, like I said, it's Sunday starter, Leighton Finley, a lot of names that come out of that bullpen. And that's can be a good thing. That can be a bad thing. It can mean you've got a lot of versatility and a lot of arms that you can rely on, but it can also mean, hey, you're having some struggles in the bullpen and you can't necessarily rely on any of these guys for longer than a couple of batters. So, that's the story of Georgia this season is they've got a lot of positionless versatility that they can use in their lineup to their benefit. They've hit the ball really well. And when they've pitched it well, they've won those games. When not, it's hard to put up just to rely on putting up 10 runs a game. They won a game 18-9 this past weekend. Right. You can't rely on scoring 10 runs, especially against a team like South Carolina, like the teams that you're going to play in the SEC. You can probably count on scoring 10 against Charleston Southern, but you can't rely on that every weekend in the SEC. So pitching has got to step up for Georgia if they're going to be competitive. And I think we'll really learn a lot about the Bulldogs this weekend as they start SEC play. Yeah.
I guess final question before we let you go, but you've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but what does Georgia have to do? This is a South Carolina team that's mashed early, a lot of home runs, a pitching staff that's been kind of what it's been billed to be coming into the year. What does Georgia have to do to walk away from this winning 2 out of the 3 games? I assume probably winning Friday, Saturday, but what do they have to do to win this series?
They can't give up home runs. I mean, that was a problem for Georgia in that Princeton series. They were able to, granted, it was 4 games, but they were able to limit majority of the home runs that they gave up to a solo shot. But I think they gave up like 10 or 11 in that series alone. That's something that has plagued Jaden Woods throughout his career. He's a guy that has a good fastball, a good changeup, not a great slider. And they're continuing to work on that. You really got to be a 3-pitch guy if you're going to be a starter in the SEC, especially a Friday night starter. Liam Sullivan, a bigger guy who brings a lot of velocity to the plate, but that can also mean that teams, when they hit the ball, it's going to go far. So
it's fast off the bat, onto the bat. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So those guys have got to go deep into games. That means that they can't give up those long home runs. They can't, they got to keep the ball in the strike zone and avoid the walks. That was a problem for Georgia last year and at times has been a problem this year. But I think if you can, like you said, those Friday, Saturday guys, what you got with them. You've got to have good outings from them in order to give yourself a chance to win this series. And if not, then all hell breaks loose on Sunday.
Yeah. And South Carolina's got a couple lefty bats in that lineup, looking at that short porch in right field, probably licking their chops at this point. So, Palmer, if people want to find you, where can they go and where can they find as much as they want to read probably on Georgia baseball, basketball, and football?
Yeah, they probably don't want to read too much Georgia basketball stuff right now. Probably going to be more transfer portal entries than it is any good news there. But Dogs HQ, part of the On3 network. Love working with you guys when we have the chance to cross over. So Dogs HQ, and then you find me on Twitter at Palmer Toms.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Palmer. Thank you so much. You go enjoy the rest of your Monday night and try to get some sleep before this crazy time that's spring ball, transfer portal, and now baseball gets cranked up.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Palmer. That was awesome. It was
awesome.
Spur of the moment. Palmer messaged me as soon as he saw our baseball stuff and was like, hey, if you want me to hop on, let's do it. And I was like, hell yeah, let's make it happen. And just fantastic. That was as great as we could possibly be, and gave us some insight because I hadn't done a whole lot of deep diving yet onto Georgia. So fantastic as always. And now we get to kind of wrap up. We can kind of talk pitching, and then we'll do a little bit of a curveball, but we'll talk some pitching quick. We'll talk a little bit of maybe what we want to see first weekend in SEC play, and then wrap it up with any questions we might have.
Yeah, absolutely. Palmer was great. I mean, every time I would think of a question, he would cover it in the moment.
Yeah, and you're like, well, yeah, no, what's the point now?
Yeah, he was great. Exactly. But
so let's transition and do some pitching. What do we think? This is the pitching staff that was billed to be top, probably, 3 or 4 in the SEC, a top 15 pitching staff in the country. It's kind of lived up to that billing, Joe, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with your starters and Sanders, Hall, and then Mahoney coming back, I mean, that's your 3-headed monster right there. And that those guys have all lived up to the billing so far too. And then I think when you have those 3 guys who are rock solid in the weekend order, it allows the guys who were kind of fringe starters last year to be bullpen guys and come out of the bullpen and really show what they've got in a couple of innings, and just adds to the depth. I think of a guy like Matthew Becker coming out of the bullpen, like his curveball is filthy. And I mean, he was a fringe starter last year, started a couple games for the Gamecocks. So I think this pitching staff has lived up to it, all that and more. And I think also too, there have been a lot of guys coming out of the bullpen, a lot of young guys, a lot of newcomers, and a lot of old faces too. But a lot of newer faces that have come on and just, dominated. And I mean, we'll get to, our MVPs and stuff like that. But I'm really, really, really excited about this pitching staff.
Yeah, it's lived up to the billing so far. It's a group that's deep. It's a group that can come at you in waves. And you saw last year, because of the injuries, and you were just decimated with those from top to bottom. it was all right. If Will feels good enough to give us 5, let's see if he can give us 6. Or Will Sanders, Noah Hall gives you 6. Let's just see if he can't get to 7. And then it's okay. Well, Kate Austin's giving you 2 really good innings out of the pen. Because you're so not deep enough. Like, can he give you a 3rd? Same with Becker. Same with all these guys. You had to stretch so many guys that it caused problems late in games. It caused problems on those Sundays, like Palmer talked about with UGA, because you just weren't deep. And this year it's like, all right, Will gives a 6, put in Jersenbeck for the 7th, put in Kate Austin for the 8th, put in Matt Becker, Chris Veach for the 9th, boom, 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 you're done. Like, you don't have to – if a guy only feels good enough to give you an inning out of the pen, you don't have to ask him to give you 2. You go back and you go to the pen. For another guy that it's, if not as good, comparable. You have matchups. It's a little bit thin on lefties. You'd like probably another lefty, maybe 2. In the pen, because you have Becker and Phipps had been good, struggled on that game 2, the Saturday one, just couldn't throw enough strikes. But you'd like to see a little bit more left-handedness. You'd like to see the good news is South Carolina's forced teams to strand 114 batters through 17 games. The bad news is they've worked themselves into a few jams along the way. You'd like to see this team not have to have, bases loaded jams or whatever, what have you. But they've been really, really good pitching out of trouble. That's what I've really enjoyed about this. You'd like to see less trouble, obviously, but they've been really good at pitching around it. If you're South Carolina and teams are only hitting 219 against them. I looked it up today. It was, I want to say South Carolina's done 150 innings of baseball this year. Teams have scored in 31 of those innings, which is fantastic in and of its own. Only 8 of those 31 innings have been multi-hit innings, multi-run innings. And I think 3 of those 8 came against Clemson. You had the 2-run inning in the first against Sanders. You had the 3-run inning on Saturday, and then you had the 4-run inning on Saturday. Those were 3 of the 8. So this is a staff that, yes, there are things to work on. Yes, you'd like to see more dominance maybe from Will Sanders. But it's been, as my girl Wrigley does that, but you'd like to see maybe a little bit more dominance from Will Sanders. Can I help you? But she's like staring at me.
He's fired up about Will Sanders.
But it's a pitching staff that's lived up to the billing and can continue to get better, which is the scary thing if you're South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. And Collyn, I'll get into my MVPs real quick. We can go that route. So my non-conference MVPs for the pitching staff, my MVP starter has been Noah Hall. I think he's been nails. I think the Saturday slot is perfect for him. He thrives in it, being the number 2 guy in the rotation. I think, if he were to give it a go on Friday, I think it would be different. I'm not convinced though. He's just been absolutely amazing.
And he goes so deep into games.
Yes.
Like he's my starter MVP too, but he goes so deep, it saves your bullpen. If Will can only give you 5, if Mahoney, coming off TJ, can only give you 5, it allows you to kind of save some of your bullpen arms. Yeah.
I mean, 2.59 ERA in 24 innings, with 4 starts, 700 runs, and 26 strikeouts. I mean, that's nuts. Like that's really, 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 really good. He has been like just striking guys out left and right, and it's to nobody's surprise. So you said he was your MVP starter, so I love how we're on the same page.
I don't think there's another choice right now. Mahoney's been good, but he's had to pitch out of some trouble, and you've seen kind of there's going to be some rust to knock off with TJ, but Mahoney's up there. Sanders has been good, not great through the first 4 starts, but I don't think there's anybody but Hall that you can give that to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. My going into the bullpen MVP, my bullpen MVP is Chris Veach. He has been a really, really, really good closer. When you had a guy like Nick Proctor coming in, there were going to be questions about who the closer was going to be. And I mean, Proctor's played well, but Veach has stepped up even more. A guy that was expected to go both ways, hitting and pitching, has more of, lean towards the pitching side. I think he's been doing really well, especially after coming off Tommy John. So Veach with a 3.38 ERA, and that number is lying to you. Numbers never lie, but yes, they are for Chris Veach, because he had that one bad outing against Clemson. But I mean, he's thrown 5 innings. He's got 2 saves. He's allowed 2 hits with 2 earned runs, 3 walks, and 7 strikeouts. 7 strikeouts in 5 innings is pretty good.
Yeah.
In my eyes. So, Collyn, who is your bullpen MVP?
I gotta go Hicksy, baby.
Yeah.
James Hicks has been awesome. He was dominant against Clemson in a series that he's spent a year looking forward to pitching in, and he's been everything you want. He's not a guy that's going to overpower you with velocity. He's 92 to 93 more often than not. But he's just a sinker baller that's going to change speeds, throw strikes, and force you. I can't tell you how many ground outs that dude. I mean, it's just ground out to short, ground out to second, ground out to short, ground out to second. And boom, boom, boom. I wouldn't be shocked if Hicks gets a start or 2 in SEC play.
Yeah, definitely.
But just depending on if they want to move things around, I wouldn't be shocked just because he has been so good, and he's a guy that can go 2 or 3 times through an order, and you were hoping he would be that for you last year before he got hurt. So before we go, I mean, let's just think about this staff. Jack Mahoney would be a Friday night starter for how many programs in the country?
A whole lot.
Matthew Becker would be in the starting rotation for how many teams in the country?
A lot.
Eli Jerzenbeck would be a starter for how many teams in the country? James Hicks would be a starter for a lot of teams in this in Division I baseball. Those are dudes coming out of the bullpen for you.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's an embarrassment of riches right now for South Carolina.
Agree.
And it makes you excited. Obviously, Hicks, you probably project, if things go the way they're supposed to, you lose Sanders, you lose Hall, you lose Mahoney, you lose Hicks, depending on, obviously the draft's coming up. But you lose those guys, but you still have a Jerzenbeck. You still have Matthew Becker. You still have Cade Austin, potentially. Cade could go if he wanted to. I don't know if he's going to have enough innings, but Cade is a draft prospect with that fastball and that changeup. That changeup's filthy. But it not only sets you up for success this year because you're so deep, but now you're not asking Eli Jerzenbeck to go out there and try to pitch in the SEC as a freshman. Yeah, he'll get his feet wet as a bullpen guy or potentially start if you want him to. But you're not asking these guys to do too much, and I think that's really impressive as we continue these MVPs. But I just think it's an embarrassment of riches as you sit here right now.
I couldn't agree more, Collyn.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at as we started this segment. Is like you have to have your 3 starters that you do on the weekend, and then you have so many other guys that could start for other programs coming out of the bullpen is nuts. And I think that's what I mean. And Hall, Sanders, and Mahoney were all on the roster, but I think bulking it up even more and having those guys healthy, knock on wood here. But I think it's crazy how much that does for you when you have those 3 guys on the weekend solidified and all that stuff, and then you have all these guys coming out of the bullpen. It's wild with everybody else. Yeah.
And I give a lot of credit to Skylar Meade. He was the guy that was the primary recruiter for a lot of these guys. All 3 of your rotation guys were recruited by Skylar Meade. All of I think Jerzenbeck committed under Skylar Meade. Matthew Becker was a Skylar Meade guy. Cade Austin might have been a Skylar Meade guy. If not, he was Jerry Myers. But you're talking about a staff that was assembled by Skylar Meade, but Justin Parker's done a fantastic job developing them. Has turned Noah Hall into what Noah Hall is. Has helped, Matthew Becker and Cade Austin develop even more. So that's something I've been really impressed with, Justin Parker got to come in and have a lot of these ingredients, but he's done the best with these ingredients so far as you've gone through the first 17 games of SEC or of non-conference play before SEC play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, my newcomer MVP, Collyn, it's a guy we've already talked about a lot, and I think it's an obvious choice.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other guy that I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So Eli Jersenbeck is my newcomer MVP. A 1.59 ERA in 11.1 innings, 8 hits, 2 runs with 15 strikeouts and 1 walk. 1 walk, Collyn. That's nuts for a true freshman. Like, this kid came right out of high school. I need to remind everybody. And there is the pool.
I saw the comment about the puppy. So this is
yes.
This is. We haven't named. My wife's standing behind the camera, so she was the one that brought it up here. But we haven't named the white one yet. There's 7 of these little buggers here for the next month or so. But as Wrigley's like staring at me intently to make sure I don't do anything bad with this one, but.
I will be over shortly to come play with the puppies.
So yeah. So Wrigley is intently watching me. So I'm gonna let my wife take this one back and let Wrigley clean her up. And it might be feeding time, so we're gonna let that go. But I saw the comment and I wanted to make sure the puppy. Yeah, Wrigley's inspecting it over there to make sure I didn't do anything to the pup.
Ashley, thank you so much for that. That was much needed. And I mean, Collyn, you're known for posting Wrigley on Twitter.
Yeah, we'll get some puppy photos in there at some point. Yes,
yeah.
We'll get some puppy photos in there at some point.
Absolutely. And I mean, this baseball team, you haven't had to post many Wrigley photos, thankfully.
Yeah, you get a little bit of a break with that one.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Jersenbeck has been an absolute stud. I think you can basically play him anywhere. Take him out the bullpen, start him in the midweek. He's gonna deal. He was a perfect game 10. The kid he's a stud. Turned down the majors to come to Columbia.
Significant money to come to Columbia.
Yeah. Oh, big money. Absolutely. And I mean, he's proving why he is all that and more. And I mean, he just shoves. I mean, it's plain and simply, and he pulls up to the ballpark and just does his job. He's not one of those guys that plays with a lot of emotion. He just shows up, does his job, clocks out.
And the moment didn't seem too big. Like he struggled some in his first bullpen appearance, came in, I think, with the bases loaded and gave up all 3 inherited runners or 2 of the 3 inherited runners and struggled there, but he's grown from that. I mean, he's a guy that over his last 6 innings, because I looked at it today, he hasn't allowed a run in his last 6 innings. He's allowed 1 hit and 1 walk, if I'm not mistaken. He's faced 20 batters. That includes the walk. I don't know if that includes the walk, but he's faced 20 batters and has struck out 11 of them. He's just got major league stuff. He's got big league stuff, and it's really impressive. And I don't know if you could pick any other newcomer outside of him right now that's your guy, because it's been impressive to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we can't say enough good things about Jers. So I guess our last one here before we get to an ad break real quick. My unsung hero is Mr. Eli Jones, another bullpen guy. He started your midweeks last year. Another guy that's, relatively young and has shown progression.
Coming off TJ too, another guy that's slowly coming back from Tommy John.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's got 1.59 ERA and 5.2 innings. Yeah, 5 2/3 innings. It's 1 earned run and 6 strikeouts. I don't think Eli gets enough credit, just simply because he is another bullpen guy that again gets overlooked. And from a guy that was a midweek starter, the guy that you would start for games that didn't. I mean, obviously the midweeks always matter, but on teams that were a little bit lesser, I think Eli's done a great job in, number 1, adapting to his new role, but 2, also, proving he can do both. And again, the Tommy John thing too. Eli's really bounced back and certainly impressed me this year.
Just throw strikes. He throws strikes and doesn't give up a ton of hits, and he's just been really good. And I'll go with my unsung hero. He's only thrown 5 innings, but I'll give it to Cade Austin. Just his ERA, you don't look at it and go, wow, that's dominant. But you're talking about a guy that's, 5 innings. He's given up 3 hits. He's walked 2. He's struck out 7 with a 1.76 batting average against. He just comes in and he either strikes you out or he gets a lot of weak contact more often than not when he's fresh. So that's the thing that you love about Cade. And, he dots up his fastball. If Noah Hall has the best changeup on the team, Cade's is not far behind. And that's when you're an SEC reliever, you can keep guys off balance, moving your fastball around and with some good spin to it and pairing it with a really good changeup and tunneling that well. So I think that that's something, if you're South Carolina, you feel really good about Cade just being one of those guys that if you need to bridge an inning or two out of the bullpen, you get him. He throws strikes. He's really good about just getting in there. He's a gamer, man. And if he does that, then, you have a really good bullpen arm that can go out there and get outs for you in SEC play. And he's shown he can do that.
Absolutely. And that's, another guy that's been a starter too.
Yeah. Before. They've tried him out there in a lot of different roles, and he's kind of just gives you outs, and they had to press him into a lot of action last year. More innings than maybe he thought he was going to get early, but just comes in. They're not asking him to do too much this year, which is exactly what you want. He's pitched in 5 games and he has 5 innings pitched. So he's not a guy that you're going to ask to go out there a ton, but he just eats it. He comes in there and he does his job and he strikes dudes out and he goes home. Like that's Cade Austin for you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Collyn, I want to talk about another sponsor of ours, Taxiety. Taxiety is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. Tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time, Collyn. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call the tax team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents, and when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. You can find their number on the screen right now, 803-462-5576. Once again, 803-462-5576. Call them for all of your tax needs, as it is tax season, Collyn. It is upon us. With baseball season comes tax season.
It's here, and I still haven't done my taxes yet. So I'm going to Liberty, and we're going to make it happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I love being independent, but
yeah,
it is nice. But so getting into our last segment, we can go over it quickly, and then we'll get to Q&A too. If you guys have questions, just hit us in the comments. We will get to those as well. But Collyn, I guess what's next is our next segment. So starting off with the offense, what is next? Offense. Yeah. What else can you do from that hot start?
Yeah, you need to be better at times situationally. We've seen some guys press at times with runners on, especially, that Penn series early against Clemson. You saw a little bit of that. So you'd like to see some things, be more consistent situationally. You'd like to see a leadoff hitter emerge, whether that's Caleb Denny, who's going to continue to get some run, whether that's they tried Will McGillis there, they tried Carson Horning there. Dylan Brewer, if he continues to play like he has over the last 4 games, is a candidate there. But you'd like to see maybe some more consistency, which you have of late. But you'd also like to see someone step up in that leadoff hitter role and find ways to really attack an SEC pitching staff, because you're not going to be able to put up 10, 20 runs like you have been at times against that, and be really good against bullpens too. A lot of these mid-major schools that you're playing in non-con have 1 or 2 guys in the bullpen. You're going to see SEC teams with a ton better. So be able to attack good bullpens and good starting pitching at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm kind of going to say something similar. I think, like I talked about at the top of the show, just kind of that clutch factor. When you have runners in base, you got to just tighten up, choke up a little bit. Put the ball in play. I think, in the non-conference, they did a decent job of it. And again, there aren't very many complaints from that offensive showing that they've brought into SEC play. But I think, you just got to work on the clutch factor. You got to, bring these runners home and do well when guys are on base. And that's how you win ball games, especially in the SEC. You got to hit well when guys are on base. So, I mean, that's really the only thing I can think of in terms of what's next for this offense, because they have been so good. Collyn, what's next for the pitching?
Keep it up. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
You'd like to see a true closer develop. Veach has done that at times. Becker's been there a little bit too. He's starting tomorrow for them against Presbyterian. They have a better idea of what the bullpen looks like, but continue to figure out roles, continue to figure out who's going to be your closer, your dude. And that's just solidifying roles, whether that's a Jersenbeck, whether that's maybe a Hicks, whether that is Veach. Just continue to have 2 or 3 guys that you can lean on to come in there and just close out games.
Yeah, I agree. I like that point. And I think, Proctor obviously hasn't done well so far. He's got shelled a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say elite walkout song.
Yeah. Elite walkout song.
Yeah,
elite.
Kung Fu Fighting is perfect.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see Proctor he's got a lot left to prove if he wants to make it in that rotation. But, he kind of came in as a transfer. Everyone kind of expected him to be the guy. So I think that potential's still in there to at least make it into the rotation with Veach. Austin, I'd love to see Jersenbeck close. I think he's got the swagger. He's got, all that and more.
He's got the quirks to do it. He's got the quirkiness that you need to be a closer in this league.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like we said, you can put Jersenbeck wherever you want, and he's going to do well. He's big leaguer. So that's kind of what I got. So I guess looking ahead to Georgia, Palmer touched on everything we needed for that.
Just give me one key if you're South Carolina to beating Georgia.
Starting fast. You got to start fast in SEC play. These bats got to get off to a hot start, and especially on the road too. South Carolina historically has not done well on the road when they don't get off to a fast start, especially in the SEC. We saw that a lot last year. They'd get down in games, or at least, the game would drag on, and then they just can't find life in the bats. I think you got to get off to a fast start, because then you can carry the momentum throughout the rest of the game. We've seen that. Even if you're not hitting home runs early, that'll come later in the game if you do get some runs early.
Yeah. And I think, too, you have to – I'll stick on the offensive side, because I think this is a pitching staff that it's good. It's a good pitching staff, and I don't think you're going to, on paper at least, shouldn't allow 10-plus runs to Georgia for 3 straight games. But you got to get those starting pitchers out. You got to work good counts. You got to work pitch counts. You got to do some damage. Because like Palmer said, that bullpen's just kind of been hit or miss, and it's been, it's not a deep bullpen. So if you can get to the bullpen and force them to use their big arms early in the series, it sets you up well later as you continue to go on. And that's something South Carolina has to do. They've been able to do that at times this year to chase that starter after 4 innings, 5 innings. You got to do that this weekend. And then, you got those lefty bats. You got Caleb Denny. You got Gavin Casas and Carson Hornung and Dylan Brewer to a degree too. Yeah. That Georgia, I've been to Georgia. That porch in right field is short. You get a ball up in the air there, and that thing is going to carry. Yeah. Hit for some power. Use that left-handedness that you spent all this offseason bringing in. And really pepper that right field short porch. And if you do that, then you have a chance to knock the starter out, and you get a chance to go and really do some damage against that roster.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't have said it any better myself. As we move into the Q&A section, not a whole lot of questions tonight, but we'll get to that. So first one from RL. Am I crazy, or did Carolina even try starting relievers a few innings late last season?
Yeah, Brett Thomas was your Friday starter, because they just pitched backwards. They had to. They would start Sanders on Saturday or Sanders on Sunday and Hall on Saturday. They were trying everything just to squeeze as many innings as possible out of this group.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have one from the mailbag from the message boards Fog22 over on the Insiders Forum asked, when is Jacob Compton scheduled to play again?
Play again, still TBD. We'll get an update from Mark Kingston. They play Tuesday, and then they'll have availability Thursday. We'll kind of get a clearer picture of what his prognosis looks like. I know that they were talking about the potential of him being out of that back brace within the next month, and that was about a month ago. So my guess is they'll start evaluating him and seeing how it's starting to heal, and then we'll know more this week and early in SEC play on what that might look like for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming into this year, he was a big piece for depth, especially at first base. Just another big bat, so I definitely need him back. So our last question, second to last question from RL. Appreciate the donation. Who's a good dog? Wrigley is.
Wrigley is a fantastic dog. That's
Absolutely.
my girl. That is my girl.
I can attest.
Yes.
And last one from RL. What is the show's Twitter handle? We currently do not have a page for the show.
Gamecock Central,
yes.
And then our own personal Twitter accounts. Collyn Taylor and
Joe,
what's your official at Joe Machika? Okay.
At Joe Machika. Yep. No at Intern Joe quite yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. We're debating. I don't know. We'll see if we get a title, but I don't know. We'll see.
I understand it.
Hashtag Intern Joe. But anyways, that is it from us tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Intern Joe. That's Collyn Taylor. Join us next week for Foul Balls, and then we have one more episode of the Hard Foul.
We'll be popping in and out during the off season with the Hard Foul, talking, transfer portals obviously going on right now. So we'll have some recruiting centric, some team centric stuff over the course of the off season as as South Carolina starts to kind of build its roster and what that might look like.
Yeah. And I mean, the women's team is the women's basketball team. So
pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. But anyways, thank you everybody for tuning in. Have a good night.